Hello, this is Clinton Power, founder of AustraliaCounselling.com.au, and it's my great pleasure to be here today with Candace Plattor, who has been in private practice in Vancouver, British Columbia, for the last 20 years. She has helped both addicts and clients of addicts really help their loved ones understand addictive behaviours and make healthier life choices. She provides clinical supervision for therapists working with addicts and their loved ones, and she writes for a blog called Psyched on the Vancouver Observer website. She's also an author of a book called Loving an Addict and Loving Yourself, and she's a registered clinical counsellor. So welcome. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Clinton.
I'm so pleased you've given up your time to speak to the Australian counsellors and the people listening to the Australia Counselling podcast. And I specifically want to talk to you about the field of addictions. But to begin with, tell us about how did your practice begin? How did you become interested in this field?
Oh, well, okay. I'll try to condense it. It all started for me in the early 70s, actually, when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is an inflammatory bowel disease that can be very debilitating and painful and difficult. But I was in my 20s when that happened, and at that point, the doctors really didn't know what to do for Crohn's. They actually misdiagnosed me for a year and thought I had colitis because this was such a new illness, and they gave me all the wrong medications for a year, which was not helpful at all. But they, like I say, in their defense, at that point, they didn't know what to do with me. So what they did do with me was they gave me a lot of medications. They gave me things like Valium and codeine and Demerol, which would probably be equivalent to today's OxyContin. And they gave that to me over and over, prescription after prescription, year after year, for a long, long time. And I took them faithfully. And then I also rediscovered pot, which I had smoked in university socially and had never been a problem for me. I liked it, but it wasn't a problem until I was sick. And I really do understand the benefits of medicinal marijuana. That's kind of how I was using it, but it's addictive, and anybody's body would become addicted to these substances. They're also all depressants in the system, so if you fast forward about 14 years, 1987, I was so depressed that I was suicidal, and I had no idea what was going on for me because addiction wasn't on the radar the way it is today. So I had a couple of choices. I could either off myself or I could reach out for help. And I reached out for help, and that was the beginning of my recovery. So that was in 1987, so I now have 26 years clean and sober. When I had 3 years clean, which is what you need here to be able to work in the addiction field, which I think is a great idea because you don't even know your own name until at least 3 years clean, I decided that I wanted to work in the addiction field. I wanted to give back. A lot of people had helped me. And so I got my first job in the addiction field in an area of Vancouver called the Downtown East Side. It's possible that people have heard of this. It's the lowest income area in Canada. And I worked as an alcohol and drug counselor in an outpatient nonprofit agency for 16 years with clients who gave me the best education I could ever get. So I feel like I've seen pretty much everything. It takes a lot to surprise me. There's hardly anything I can't work with, which doesn't mean to say I don't work with everything, because I don't choose to, but I can, pretty much. And, after a while, it was time to leave the Downtown East Side, and I went into private practice in 2007. So that's what I've been doing since then. I love it. I'm very happy doing that. But toward the end of my time in the Downtown East Side, I started to get phone calls from loved ones of people with addiction. Sometimes the addicts were my clients, and sometimes they weren't. People were just calling me and saying, we're at the end of our rope. What do we do? We've tried everything. Nothing is working. And at that point, I don't even know why they were calling me for this. I don't. But at that point, I just listened. I brought them in. We had sessions. I listened to them. And I started hearing some patterns that I knew could not be healthy. Things like giving an addict money, driving an addict to the dealer or the alcoholic to the liquor store. At least they knew where their loved one was. They were in the seat next to them in the car. But that is not a good idea, So as I listened to these things, I started to piece together kind of a strategy of how to actually help somebody with an addiction as opposed to enable them. And I knew that I couldn't reach everybody that wanted to work with me or that needed to hear about this. So I decided to write a book. And in 2010, I self-published Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself, the top 10 survival tips for loving someone with an addiction. And it was very well received. It's won some awards, much to my, astonishment. But, but 2 years later, I published the workbook that goes along with it. So it's Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself, the workbook. And that also won some awards, which is very unusual for a workbook. So they both won international and USA book awards. And if anyone had told me years and years ago that I was going to do anything worthwhile, anything of value, anything that could actually contribute to the world, I would have thought they were crazy. So I feel like I'm living proof that people can change, that addicts can recover, that we can give back, but the right things need to be done. So that's how I got involved.
That's a fantastic story, Candace. I visited Vancouver last August for the first time. What a beautiful city it is. But I did see the east side, downtown, and it was I felt a bit confronted and shocked by the number of addicts that were on the street and people dealing, out in the open. So obviously you're working with hardcore addicts down in that area.
Yes, yes. Some of them really, really wanted help, and some of them didn't. But the ones who did, it was a joy to work with them.
So let's talk about, in terms of therapists working with people with addictions, what are some of the telltale signs? Because every day we're sitting with clients, and I know even myself, sometimes I have the thought, does this person have a problem with alcohol? That tends to be more what I see, or this drug. So how do we know?
Well, are you asking the question from the point of view of knowing that they are using substances, or not even knowing that?
Well, it tends to be that people I work, it's quite overt, and I work with a lot of people that I think are probably borderline alcoholics or alcoholics. And what I've noticed recently is it seems to be quite normal for my clients to say they drink 1 bottle to 2 bottles of wine a night every day of the week, and that really concerns me, considering that the recommended healthy range is actually 2 standard drinks a day.
Yep. Well, I think if you're getting that kind of information, it's a little bit easier. If people are telling you that, then you know that they have a problem. And I think what happens with therapists sometimes, especially some that aren't trained in the addiction field, but even if they are, sometimes, we go into this field because we really want to help people, and we really want to help, and we're people pleasers, and we want to do that, and we want people to like us. And I'm just as guilty of that as anybody else when I first started. Now I feel very different about that, but I think we need to be careful of that as clinicians, because if we're coming from a place of any codependency in our own background or anything that we're bringing into the therapy room, we're not really going to help the person. So I think that we need to be able to be a reality check for people, and to be able to be a mirror for them and to tell them what we think the truth is.
So you're talking about being really direct and honest with clients.
Yes, but in a compassionate way, because people who are drinking 2 bottles of wine a night have a problem, and they don't want to feel what they're feeling. So, I don't want to strip people naked of their defenses, but at the same time, they're coming to me because they want some help. So I would say to them, in my opinion, it's not a good idea to be drinking 2 bottles of wine a night. That's excessive. I don't know if you're aware that that's excessive, and I would educate them and teach them about that. The other thing is, if they're in relationships and the relationships are really suffering, or if their job performance is suffering, or they're at risk of losing their job or relationship because of anything to do with the addiction, that's something we also need to be a mirror with. We need to feed that back to them, because the difference really between a habit and an addiction, or a social using of a mind-altering substance and an addiction to it, is that the substance is really detrimentally interfering with a person's life.
Yes.
If you have a couple of drinks a day, you're probably not too bothered by this. But if you're drinking a couple of bottles of wine a night, or you're binging, there are many ways to be an alcoholic. There are many ways to be a drug addict, almost as many ways as there are people doing it. But if it's really interfering with your life, then if you've come to somebody like me, you're probably wanting some help, unless you're coming because somebody told you had to, which happens too.
I tend to work with a lot of couples and relationship issues, and so of course the alcohol use is not the presenting issue, but it tends to come out, and I often notice the response in the client. They tend to minimise, perhaps when I do share my concern or let them know what the healthy range of drinking is, and I may say that you're really in the range of permanent brain damage. These are potential consequences that the client can tend to minimise. And then the other response, I'm not sure about in Canada, but we have a huge binge drinking culture here in Australia. And recently in the press there's been a lot of terrible news of people, young people getting killed because of alcohol-fueled violence, getting punched, we're calling it a king hit, which has now been renamed a coward's punch. But there's been a number of examples of young people receiving one big hit to the head in the street, unprovoked attacks, and then them dying or being permanently brain damaged. So it's a very, very current issue at the moment. But I think there's something very unique to the Australian culture where drinking almost seems to be a rite of passage, and kind of street fighting seems to be a rite of passage for young people. And I'm not sure if that's happening in Canada. But how do you work with clients and really start to minimise when you give them this feedback? Well, they normalise it. They say, my mates are drinking. This is not unusual.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would ask them why they're with me, why they've come, what's the presenting problem for them, what's going on, what are some of the consequences they've faced through their own drinking or drug use. Here we do have a lot of binge drinking. We're starting to see more street fighting. We don't have what you're describing, not yet, and I hope we never do. Horrible, that's horrible. But what we do see is that alcohol use leads pretty much directly to cocaine, crack, those kinds of drugs. So those and some of the other uppers that are very difficult to get off. So to educate them about that as well. And I come from a place of choice more than anything else. They have a choice. They don't have to stop. And if they want to experiment, if they talk about wanting to try controlled drinking or controlled using, because many people who are in treatment for alcohol and drug issues and counseling, they first want to be, they're terrified to let go of their addiction. I mean, it's been their best friend, and it's what everybody they know does a lot of the time, and it's fun, and it makes them feel good, and they don't have to feel what they feel, and all of that stuff. So you know, a lot of them don't want to give it up, especially in the beginning, so they want to try to control it. So I'll work with them around that. I don't think we have to start at a place of abstinence, but if somebody actually is an alcoholic or an addict, we have to get to that place because, you know, but they need to see that. They need to see that they've tried controlled drinking for a little while and oops, guess what? Doesn't work.
Well, that's a nice segue into my next question, because I am curious to know, how do you decide which intervention to use for which client? I mean, there's so many treatment options, of course. There's one-on-one counselling, there's educational groups, there's group therapy, there's rehab down the other end. How would you decide as a therapist what is the best intervention for a client, or do you start where they're at?
Well, I always start where a client is at, because I think if you try to force somebody, I don't think we really can force anybody, but if somebody feels forced, I don't think the recovery is going to be as good, you know, as clean and healthy as it would be if they reached the bottom. Here, I don't know how it is there, but here we kind of have two types of rehab. We have the treatment centers that are funded partially, at least, by the government, and so people don't have to pay as much, and if you're on welfare you don't have to pay anything, so people from the downtown east side, for example, would be able to go for free. But there are huge waiting lists because our government has shut down so many social programs, so there are big waiting lists. So there's really not much in between. There's that, and then there are the very, very expensive treatment centers, the really lush, posh, you know, like you're in a country club kind of treatment center that costs upwards of $20,000 for a month, you know, and people mortgage their homes, loved ones mortgage their homes to get the addicts in there. It's a crazy system. So usually what I like to do is I like to work with somebody first for a little while, one-to-one. It's a lot cheaper for them, and I can usually give them the kind of education and get down into the problems that they're really facing just as much as a treatment center can. But I also think that rehab is an amazing thing for people if they can afford it and if they can go. I went. It was great for me. I was only, well, I actually, when I went, this was allowed when I went. It's not anymore, but in most places. But I remember I went to Victoria for treatment from Vancouver, and I remember getting high on the ferry to be able to get myself to treatment, right? Yes. So I got to treatment, and I was high as a kite, and they took me anyway. Now you need some clean time to show your willingness to be able to be in there.
And that's the same case in Australia. You need to, I think for most rehabs, you go into detox for 7 to 10 days at least before you go into a rehab.
Oh, really? It's less than, sometimes it's like 72 hours and they'll take you. Some of the treatment centers really want the clients because they get a lot of money for having the clients, you know. And some of those centers are very good. I'm not trying to put them down. I think they have really good programs, and a few of them here have family programs for the loved ones, which is so important, because if an addict goes to treatment or even is working with a counselor and the loved ones aren't doing their work, there can't be a real recovery. You know, addicts and alcoholics really need their loved ones to be there for them. They need the support, they need them, but they need them to be healthy. And they need them to know what to do and what not to do. It's, you know, I think we see, do you guys get the show Intervention in Australia? No, we have a show here called Intervention, and it's, you know, it's television, so some of it is just really bigger than it could be. But they, you know, they show, there's a little bit of work that's done with the family. They write their letters, they read their letters. It's like those kinds of interventions. But I don't feel that there's enough family work going on with these people, because what happens is that the addicts go into treatment, they start to understand what's going on for them. But then when they're released, they come back into the same dysfunctional milieu that they came from. And many of them don't stay clean because of that.
But would that be the advantage of a rehab, that most rehabs do tend to have family time and bring the family in for education and speaking with the addict?
Yeah, except there isn't enough for the family,
Yeah.
because sometimes they're very entrenched in not so good behaviors, and they really need treatment themselves. They need to work with somebody like myself. And so I'm all, I over the years, this has become my niche. This has become my specialty, is that I work primarily with the loved ones, because there aren't enough resources for them. There aren't enough therapists doing that work. There aren't enough treatment centers that have really good and comprehensive family programs. They might come in for a weekend or a week, where they stay there for a week. That's good. It's better than nothing. But we need an ongoing thing. So what happens when the addict comes home and all the family has gotten is 1 week? Well, that's when they come to me. Or what happens if their loved one won't go? That's when they come to me. And we devise a strategy about how we can maybe do some things differently. Because in my opinion, what we need to do, the most loving thing that we can do for addicts in active addiction, is to make it really uncomfortable for them to stay in active addiction. That's our job.
So in your private practice, you're working with individuals, and at some point you bring the family in, or you work with the family members as well. Is that how you work?
That's how I used to work. Now I get more calls from the family members than I do from the addicts.
Okay.
And often, because of a very heavy, I'm the person that people come to, that loved ones come to in Vancouver, because I've written the books and I've been doing this work for a long time. I'm kind of the go-to person for that. So often when an addict calls me, I will refer them out, because there are so many loved ones who are calling, who are wanting some help. And I think that the most effective way, and probably cost-effective way, to fight the war on drugs is to stop the enabling. And if that can happen, if I can help them stop enabling, we have a great commercial here on TV. It's a cheese commercial. There's an elderly couple sitting at a dining room table with their 2 middle-aged children who are living in their home. The couple is rolling their eyes like, how do we get these guys out of here? The mother goes into the kitchen, brings the food, and actually ladles it onto the plates. I mean, talk about enabling, right? Is doing that for her 50-year-old children. And the tagline of that commercial is, "Stop cooking with cheese." So I tell my clients about this commercial if they haven't seen it. Stop making it so comfortable. Stop cooking with cheese. Stop doing those things. Things will start to change, and invariably they do. Almost all the time when the enabling stops, the ripple effect is that the addicts go, oh, I'm being said no to, uh-oh, and things start to happen.
So how do we know in the therapy room when enabling behaviour is going on? I mean, my understanding, and I don't work in the addictions field, but my limited understanding about enabling is that often enablers are completely oblivious that they're doing it, and they can also experience a lot of grief and loss when they start to realise they have been enabling. So can you speak a little bit about, maybe just define what enabling is for those that don't know, and how can we treat it in the room?
Okay. Well, simply put, enabling behaviors keep the addiction going, like giving money to an addict, letting an adult child live at home and not have to contribute, and actually be abusive in the home. There's all kinds of ways to enable, paying the rent, just all kinds of things. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So if people are enabling in these kinds of ways, if addicts aren't being held accountable for their own behavior, if the bar isn't raised for them to change, why should they? So they often don't. And so this is not a loving act toward the addict. And this is actually the loved one's needs being met more than the addicts. The addicts don't need to be enabled. The addicts want to be enabled, but they don't need to be enabled. But the loved ones often, like I was saying before, are people pleasers and fear conflict at any cost. We're not gonna, I'm gonna tread on eggshells. I'm gonna make sure nobody, because I need to be liked. I need to be, and when a loved one comes from that place, it can be very damaging to the addict. So if the loved one wants the addict to clean up, that's going to make the addict feel uncomfortable. And what the loved ones need to understand is that when they start doing things differently, they're going to be uncomfortable too. And the only way that an addiction can really stop is if we allow ourselves to be uncomfortable. Otherwise, because we're using it to stay comfortable, right?
So there's no easy option here.
There's no easy option here, but there's definitely healthy options.
Yes.
So, what happens for the loved ones is that they become addicted to the addict's addiction. They get right on the roller coaster with them, because any addict in active addiction is on a chaotic cycle all the time. It's crazy. And when the addict is doing okay, the loved ones are doing okay. Everything's fine. When the addict isn't doing well, the loved ones aren't doing well either. They start going to their doctors for antidepressants. They can't sleep at night. So we need to get them off that roller coaster and have them focus on their own lives. To understand, there's a quote in my book that I just love from Robert Heinlein. He's a science fiction writer. And he says, never try to teach a pig to sing. It's a waste of your time, and it annoys the pig.
I love that.
Right? Yeah. So I teach them how to come off the roller coaster, take care of their own life, and that ripple effect, and set boundaries, self-respect, to set self-respecting boundaries. That's a whole new concept for a lot of loved ones. And the ripple effect of that is that the addicts usually sit up and take notice and maybe even want a piece of that for themselves. That's when change can happen. I think the enabling, the loved ones actually need to be worked with either first or definitely in tandem with the addicts.
Yes, that's what I'm taking from what you're saying, Candace. It sounds essential that you can't work with an addict in isolation. You need to bring other people in their life.
That's right. Addicts don't become addicts in isolation. They don't recover in isolation.
Yeah. Tell us about, what does the research say about treatment models? I mean, is there research saying that one treatment model is more effective than another, or is it back to, it's more about the therapist and the approach and the belief in the therapist's approach?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter, and I don't really put a lot of store in research, to be honest. I mean, our best research has gotten us treatment centers that keep people for 28 days. That's not nearly long enough. But most people can't even afford 28 days. They can't afford more than 28 days. But a month, when they've had years and years and years and years of using, and then they go back into their lives and they don't know what they're doing and they still don't know their name, So our best research has gotten us that model, and has also, and I want to be careful with this because I know that this is provocative for some people, but it's also almost always based on a 12-step model. At least it is here, like in AA, yes. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. What we know to be true today is that approach doesn't work for everyone. It works for a lot of people, and that's wonderful, but it does not work for everyone. And it used to be said that if a client wasn't willing to do the 12 steps, that they weren't showing the willingness to do whatever it takes, kind of thing. And that's a very shaming message. The 12 steps, the way they're written, they were written in 1935 by two upper-class white Christian males, and the wording is exactly the same in 2014 as it was in 1935, and it puts a lot of people off. The capital G God, the capital H Him, a lot of stuff, The 12-step programs have a lot of really wonderful things in them. The fellowship is amazing, to be able to be with like-minded people who also want to stay clean and sober. Sponsorships, somebody finally has your back. You know, there's a lot of good things in the program, but it doesn't work for everybody. So our research tells us that the only way to recover is 12-step programs. I don't believe in that. And thankfully today we have alternatives, so people can do different things. But sometimes one-to-one counseling with a skilled person who can see and help them understand that addiction is a symptom only, sometimes is a very devastating symptom, but it's really only a symptom of what's underneath. We got to get underneath, we got to get down and dirty. And if they can work with a therapist who's willing to do that, often they can do the same work one-to-one that they can do in a treatment center. So
that's a great point. And over the years, I have heard a number of clients say to me that they stepped into AA and stepped out straight away and were very put off by, I think what you say, some of the approach or the references to God, particularly if they're not they don't have a spiritual life themselves. But I know in Australia we have some alternatives like Smart Recovery. I'm not sure if you have that there.
Here too, yeah. So when I cleaned up, there were no other alternatives, and I think 12-step programs saved my life. Absolutely, I don't go to them anymore. I grew the wording of the steps, and so I think that we need to be careful and not shame clients about what it is that if they're willing to do some work, let's meet them where they are. Let's us shift and expand ourselves and challenge ourselves and raise the bar and find a way to work with clients who don't want to go to 12-step programs. I usually suggest that people go to 3 12-step programs or 3 meetings before they absolutely make up their minds. Some people will do that, some people won't do that. But if they won't do that, it doesn't mean that they don't want to be clean and sober. And that's what we need to see today.
I love that. Candace, I feel like I could speak to you all day about this. Your passion is just so tangible and you're just a wealth of information. How can people contact you if they want to find out more?
They can contact me at my website at CandacePlattor.com. That's CandacePlattor. Can I say one more thing, though, before we go? Do we have time?
Yes, absolutely.
I really work from what I call a choice model. And again, this is a provocative thing for people sometimes, but I believe that being in active addiction is a choice that people make. I don't believe that we chose to become addicts. I know I didn't choose to become an addict. I don't think anybody does, and I think most people think they won't become addicted, right? Most people who do become addicted think, well, it won't get me. Right? So they're not out there trying to become addicts. That's not what I'm saying. But there is a choice point that happens when an addict knows that they have a problem, and usually they know way before they go get help. They know what's going on. They know. And when they know, that's where the choice point is. Are they going to stay in active addiction, or are they going to go into active recovery of some sort? And it's absolutely a choice. So whether addiction is a disease, I don't know, I'm not a medical person, definitely has brain involvement. I can't argue with that. Whether it's got a genetic component to it or it's something we learn at home, all of those things could be true. Ultimately, they kind of don't matter because underneath all of that, you're making a choice about whether you're going to use something and not face the reality of your situation, or whether you're going to not use something and face it and deal with it.
It sounds like a very empowering position. I mean, even to put that to a client, that they do have a choice.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think sometimes when we talk about addiction being a disease or a brain disease, addicts come away from that thinking, I mean, even if it is, if we talk about that too much, addicts come away from that thinking, oh, well, I just got this disease. Yeah. Or they get really righteous about it and say, well, I can't help it. I'm an addict. I've got a disease. Don't tell me to clean up.
Yeah. It's biological. It's in my genes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very misleading and it's very unempowering. They have a choice.
Now, I had a quick look at your book last night. I only received it yesterday, but I have to say I'm so impressed. The book again is called Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself, and there's also the workbook. So there's 2 books there. How can they get hold of your book, Candace?
My book, first of all, both books are on Amazon everywhere in the world that there is Amazon. So you can go to Amazon.au in your country.
Amazon.com. Yeah.
Okay, Amazon.com. And if you want the ebook of either one, you can go onto my website. There's a products page on my website that will show you how to order the ebook. So
Great.
That's how. Yeah.
And we'll put links to Amazon and your website and where they can get the book on the show notes as well, so people can just pop on straight over and get those resources. So.
And if anybody would like to, they can go to their favorite bookstore and ask them to order them. I'd love to have them in. We have them in bookstores here and actually throughout North America, and they're being used in treatment centers as well for the family programs. So, please go to your bookstore, ask them to order it. I'd love that.
Great. Yeah, I think this is a resource that even many therapists, should have in their offices to be able to give to clients or show clients so they can order it themselves. I know I'm going to be going back and forth to this book because it answered so many questions that I have, and I'm just looking forward to going back and diving in. So congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for giving up your time to speak to the Australian counsellors and all the listeners on the Australian Counselling podcast, and I hope we can speak again sometime soon.
I do too. Yeah. Thanks, Clint.